With all the people that we've worked with over many years now, we've been able to really delve in and condense a system or a method that works. So we've seen out of the success stories and the not quite success stories, or the success stories to come, I like to say, is we've been able to really condense it into in what we call the KARMONY method. So it's based on 7 key principles that we know and we've seen time and time again. If you understand the principles, if you adhere to the principles with some consistency over time, you are absolutely guaranteed success. And not even that, it becomes easy and it becomes fun and becomes an easy thing to just put into your life on a regular basis. We're going to have a chat today about one of the key principles of the KARMONY method. Now, before we get into that, I need to say that you've got to be courageous with this stuff, all right? And you've got to go deep, because that's where the change really happens. So if we sit on the surface, we only get surface change, and that's very transient, all right? It's flippant, and there's not much resilience with it, so it's easier to sort of be flicked off track when you're just sitting on the surface. So we go deep, we get strong roots, and we change things from down there. All right, so not the first key principle, one of the key principles of the KARMONY method, because they're all as important as each other, they all interlap and they all support each other. So I want to talk about values today. All right, now, just a really simple way of defining values is one's judgment of what is important in life, and that's different for every individual, and it's definitely not my place to tell you what your values are, and vice versa. Anyone that does that, we're going to get pushback from that sort of thing, and with good reason. You need to have your own values, you need to own them, but today is going to be about delving in and not analysing your values, but finding out what they really are. All right? Putting a mirror up to yourself. We're going to give you an activity that's going to allow you to do that. You might be asking, what the hell do my values have to do with my health, my performance, my well-being, or my fitness? We're going to show you exactly what it has to do with it. All right, we've just gone through the definition of what values are. So one's judgment of what is important in life. Now that literally determines how we think, how we feel, and then how we act and behave, which are pretty important aspects of life. You could argue that is life, and that is you.
So something that we really need to understand about values before we move on is that we all have values, but a lot of us might not have consciously chosen what our values are and really thought about who we want to be and what's important to us as an adult. When we grow up in our families, we inherit the values of our families, we inherit the values of our communities and our culture that we're part of. And we may do that as an adult as well. Being part of KARMONY, you may have inherited some of our values without really consciously having gone, yeah, that's important to me and I'm going to do that. It may have been what Brian likes to refer to as positive peer pressure, and you've jumped along into the wave. But again, don't just do what other people are doing. It's important for you to make the choices for yourself. So, this is where we get a little deeper. Let's say that you've inherited your value system and you've never really given it thought about what's most important to you. So if that's you, then our thoughts are based on those unconscious or buried values that we haven't really thought about. So when this happens, I think this, where it's a program. We all have it. So when this happens, I think this. After I've had that thought, I then feel happy, I feel stressed, I feel anxious, I feel excited, I feel enthusiastic. Therefore, we then take an action or behaviour based on the feeling we've just had, and that feeling is based on the thought that we had before the feeling. Hopefully that's not too confusing for you right now. So that means that the actions and the behaviours that we have chosen and done, we have literally created who we are right now and this life, which means that we have the power to control essentially who we are moving forwards. So if we have that inherited unconscious set of value systems, then we are likely to have felt a little out of control in terms of these things. and may have chosen other measures to gain control in our lives. Okay, so if you're someone who has consciously taken the time and space to understand and develop what you want your own values to be, that means that we are consciously deciding how we want to think, then how we want to feel, and we are choosing the actions and behaviours that we take based on what we want our values to be and who we want to be. So what can be quite interesting to look at is if you're someone who continues to self-sabotage, a classic example would be you work out, you work out really well every week, you're pretty good with your nutrition, and then you'll go and blow it out with alcohol and pizza and all sorts every weekend. If you're into that, in that sort of category, then Brian is going to take you through now an excellent exercise where we can help bring light to what your values actually are versus what we think they are.
Quite literally, you are, and me, quite possibly running off a program that someone else has written for us. How annoying. All right, now, it wasn't your fault because you probably didn't know how this stuff works, but now you know how it works. It's your fault in the future if you keep going this way. This activity is going to bring to light what your real values are. It's going to be confronting. Sometimes we don't like looking in the mirror, but we've got to make peace with that, and it's the only way to make positive change moving forward. Okay? So what I want you to do to start with, I want you to list down what you think your key values are. Okay, I've given you some ideas here. There's definitely some things that I haven't put up there. And as I was saying before, everyone's got different values, and what's important to you has no relevance to everyone else. It's what's important to you. Okay, so let's start by listing down the values, and let's ideally put it in the priority for you. Okay, so go ahead with that. All right, we've done that. Let's go over to the other side of the board. We're going to call this our resources. We could call it our energy, we could call it our input or our output, whichever phrase you want to use. So it's our resources. So it's what we've got throughout our day and our life to allocate towards these values. All right, dollars, pretty self-explanatory. You probably never thought about it, but where you spend your dollars is a direct sign of your values, hopefully. Where you spend your time, your thoughts, and your efforts. Okay? Okay, now's where the magic starts to happen, or you might get a couple of punches in the face. What I want you to do is start writing down, and let's do it on you can either do it on a daily basis, maybe a weekly basis will be a bit more accurate, is start to write down then, alongside the values for you, not these values, the values that you've got, and you might only have 2 or 3 of them to start with, that's fine, you might have 15 of them. Start to then allocate how many dollars a week are you spending on your health? How many dollars a week are you spending on your relationship? And so forth. Then do the same for time, all right? Even if it doesn't necessarily it could be hours, it could be percentage, whatever works for you, just to get an idea. Thoughts and effort, a little bit harder to quantify, but if you're honest with yourself, I'm sure you can delve in and go, man, I think about this all the time. I'm thinking about this all the time. All right, and do your best to sort of spread it over time. It's not just the present moment, because you might be worked up about a certain thing at this point in time, but try to open it up so you get some more accurate picture over a period of time. All right, have a shot at that. After we've done that activity, I reckon there's a fair chance, and there may or may not be, but I reckon there's a fair chance, after you add up how many dollars you're spending on these things that are important to you, that you've set are your key values, where's the rest of the money? Okay, what else are you spending your money on? Let's start to take track of that too. So where else is that money being allocated to? And time, and thoughts, and effort. All right, you've got to delve in here. There's going to be some things that aren't so obvious to you, but then when you start thinking about it, you're like, oh shit. Okay, so take note of those as well. Here's an example. This is a really, 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 really common one that we see over and over and over and over again. My health is my number one priority, or maybe my top 4 or 5. I shouldn't say number one because a lot of people, family will come first, and maybe relationship will come second. Career and business is usually pretty high up as well. But health, they will say, is a key priority. What we find is how many dollars they're spending per week. It might be $40. Might be $100. All right, might even be less than that. And then we delve in and we find out that they're spending $350 on a car payment. All right, and everyone likes to have nice things, I get that, but that is a pretty obvious difference, all right, and it slams you in the face of where your values are, okay? If this was important to you, I'm not saying you have to spend $350 a week on that, but there's obviously something here that you value way more higher than this. If you're spending $350 on a car and minimal on health, and you're saying that your health is a high value, something's out of whack. I understand that was a bit blunt, but what we need to ask ourselves, if we go in a bit further than that, is why did we spend, or why are we spending $350 on a car payment each week above a car that we could be spending $150 a week on? Okay, that's what we still need to start to dive into these things. What is it? You know what it is, it's status, okay? Which means that status now becomes a key value for you, all right? Now this is being honest, and it's being aware of where your values actually are. All right, so the whole point of this is we're starting to address, we're taking a stock take of where we're at, or probably a stock take more of what's happened in the past, of where we're at, so we can get a clear picture. Okay, now these are obviously where my values are today and what they've been in the past, and then if we want to address that, we want to make some changes, we can, we've got a starting place. Hey Kirsty, how much money did you pay for these sunglasses?
Oh, way too much, Brian.
It might sound like I've picked on status there. Not at all. Status is important, and it's your right to choose what your values are. It's no one else's right. All right. I mean, who are they to say? So what we're working towards here, and this can take a little bit of time. So you don't have to rush this. You can spend a week with this. You can spend even longer. If you feel like you've nailed it after a day, that's fine. So we're going to get to a point now where we initially put what we thought were our key values. Now what we've done is we've allocated where we're spending our resources, okay? That's going to now give us a more accurate snapshot of what we actually are valuing. This is the proof, okay? So let's get our top 5 from there. Then we'll get our top 5 from what we previously thought and where we want them to be, and let's see how they compare. What we're left with now is our 5 values that we want to have, to prioritise, and the more accurate picture of what our actual 5 values are. Okay? Look at the 2, and then see if we're comfortable with where they're at. If we're not comfortable with where they're at, and we want to get to where we want them to be, then what we need to do is we need to reallocate our resources so they're in line with where we want our values to be, all right? Until we get that happening, we're always going to get frustration and we're always going to get self-sabotage. So it's time to grab a coffee or a wine or a beer or a glass of water, cup of tea, whatever you want, and go through this activity. All right, spend some time with it. You don't need to get too deep about it, but be honest and dive in, because literally this activity can really change your life, and it can take some frustration out of things and make things so much smoother and easier moving forward. So have some fun with it. Let us know how you go.